Hey, what's going on, everybody? Johnny here, back for another episode. And on today's episode, I wanted to talk about a topic that has been talked about and debated around water coolers, barbershops, with family members, with friends, probably with even some of your coworkers at work. And that's who I believe are the top 10 NBA players of all time. So I originally had talked about this way back on episode 24 of the Are You Listening Now podcast. And since there are some things that has changed, I thought I should do an update to the list. Even though pretty much every list is based on opinion, I'm going to base mine on some facts that I feel warrant the players that I have being slotted where they are. So without further ado, let me go ahead and jump into the list and start at number 10. And at number 10 on my list, I have Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon, who I feel is a very, very underrated player nowadays. He is a career 22 point per game scorer. He averaged 11 rebounds a game, 51.2% field goal percentage from the field. He was a 12-time All-Star, a 12-time All-NBA member, 8 of those being first team. He was the 1984-85. He was on the all-rookie team that year. He was a 2-time, of course, finals MVP. He had a regular season MVP. He was 2-time defensive player of the year. He was 9-time all defense. And of course, since he was a 2-time finals MVP, that means he had 2 NBA championships. So during the Jordan era, he managed to get 2 titles. And yes, I do know the argument that he only won those titles because Jordan retired. But during that span, though, even with Jordan playing, the Rockets actually had a winning record against the Bulls. So it might have been interesting if they had actually met up in the finals about who would have won, in my opinion. Of course, during the time that he played, he was widely considered the best center in his era. He is also one of 4 players to record a quadruple-double in NBA history, and he should have actually had 2 of those, but the NBA took one away because of some technicality with rebound, I think. And then, of course, 2 nights later, he just went and did it again and got his quadruple-double. So Hakeem Olajuwon is the player I have at number 10 on my list. He was very good on offense, and he was great on defense. Some people consider him the greatest defensive player who ever played. I have him as my second greatest defensive player who ever played. There's a couple guys that I have ranked ahead of him, who one I think was the greatest defensive player in my opinion, and the other one being, you could flip-flop the two, but close. But that's who I have at number 10. Let's go to number 9 on my list, and I have the Diesel, Shaquille O'Neal. He was a 24-point-per-game scorer, 11 rebounds. He was 58% from the field. He was a 15-time All-Star. He was 14 times All-NBA, 4-time NBA champion, of course, with 3 finals MVPs. He had a regular season MVP, should have had more than one, but whatever. He was the 1992-93 Rookie of the Year. He was a 2-time scoring champ as well. Now, for a 3-year stretch, he was the most dominant force in NBA history, which is actually pretty great considering there was this guy called Wilt Chamberlain who played in the league. For any youngsters who don't know about him, go look him up. But no one could stop this man. Those Laker teams were the last team to three-peat, and he, along with, of course, Kobe Bryant being there, were the reason why. He went to the finals with 3 different teams. He only made 3 all-defensive teams in his career, but to me, he was underrated in that area of his game, in my opinion. So that's why I have Shaquille O'Neal at number 9 on my list. To get to number 8 on my list, I have Larry Joe Bird, the Hick from French Lick. That was his name. It was his nickname. I didn't make that one up. I didn't give it to him. But he was a 24.3 points per game scorer. He averaged 10 rebounds a game for his career. 6.3 assists for his career. He was a 49.6, so might as well just round that up to 50% from the field. He was an 88.6% free throw shooter, which is pretty great. He was a 12-time All-Star, 10-time All-NBA. He was the 1979-80 Rookie of the Year. Of course, he was a 3-time MVP. He won 3 of those in a row, the last player to do that. He was a 3-time NBA champion and a 2-time Finals MVP. So when Larry Bird came into the league, he was already considered great, especially when he was in college. Some considered him the best player in college basketball when he was there at the time. During the 80s, he was the best player on the Celtics, helping guide them to the finals 5 times and, of course, winning 3 of those. Larry Legend, for quite a while, was considered the greatest power forward to ever play until one player that came along later that we will talk about here shortly. Larry was also the last player in NBA history to win the MVP 3 times in a row, as I mentioned. I know some people I've heard lately with the slander has talked about his defense not being that good. And look, was he one of the greatest defenders ever? No. But with that being said, his impact on the game, in spite of his defensive deficiencies, was just so great. And he was the driving force of why that Celtics team won. So I have him number 8 on my list. Let's go to number 7 on my list. So I know I'm about to get a bunch of hate for this. But when you take emotion out of it and you actually think about his career objectively, I think many of you will know I'm right. So the number 7 greatest player in the league in the entire history of the NBA is one Kobe Bean Bryant, the Black Mamba, as he was famously called. He averaged 25 points a game for his career, 5 rebounds, 4.7. Let's round him up and give him 5 assists a game, 45% field goal percentage shooting from the field, which, for anybody asking, was right in line with the league average for that time. Because I know a lot of people give him slack for that, but he was right in line with the league average while he was playing, so cut that out. He was efficient. He was an 18-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA. He actually was 12-time All-Defense, 9 of those being first team. He was a 5-time NBA champion, 2-time Finals MVP. He won the MVP in the regular season once. He was a 4-time All-Star Game MVP, which I believe is still the record. And he's 4th on the all-time scoring list. Yes, we know that Kobe was great, and his impact on the court, even off the court in some ways, was felt during his playing career, and even is still being felt after his passing. God rest his soul. He was the closest thing we had to MJ since he retired, and for years, in my opinion, from about, you could say 2004 to about 2008, and you can even argue 2009, Kobe was considered the best player on the planet. I know there's been some people saying that was LeBron and even Tim Duncan, which the Tim Duncan one, if you want to argue between, I don't know, 2003 to maybe 2006 was the best, then fine. I won't kill you for that one, but saying anybody other than those 2 players during that span was the best player, you're lying and you're trying to twist history. With that being said, we all know he won with Shaq, but he proved that he just wasn't going to go along for a ride and be a sidekick by getting the 3 NBA finals himself without Shaq and actually winning 2 of those on his own. No denying his greatness, which is why I have him on the list, and he is a top 10 player, despite what some people on the internet I've heard say. Let's get to number 6 on my list, because these 6 players, I believe, had a better career. Because again, and that there's many other ways to impact the game other than just, one-on-one style hoops. But let's get to number 6. So, the player I have at number 6, his stats don't necessarily pop off the charts at you. He only averaged 19 points a game, 11 rebounds, 3 assists a game, 51% shooting from the field. But his career achievements that he actually was able to achieve in his career might actually pop off at you, and that's why I have him at number 6. He was a 15-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA, 15-time All-Defense. He was a 5-time NBA champion, 3-time Finals MVP, 2-time NBA MVP. He was a 97-98 Rookie of the Year. And, of course, he was an All-Star Game MVP, which I know a lot of people don't put stock into the All-Star Game. I don't blame you, but, if you actually get that award, I'm going to give you credit for it. The big fundamental is regarded, rightfully so, as the greatest power forward in NBA history. In his entire career with San Antonio, he never missed the playoffs. I'm going to say that again. For his entire playing career in San Antonio, he never missed the playoffs, and that team was revamped several times. He was the cornerstone and the face of the Spurs for 2 decades, and it was because of his unselfishness and leadership, and yes, also skills, that made the Spurs a title contender. Every year he was there. For anyone that thinks that Tim Duncan is maybe I have him rated too high on the list, look at it this way. No one I've listed below him is considered the undisputed best player in their position. But Tim is the most underrated and underappreciated great NBA player in history, in my opinion, but he ain't here. That was actually this guy, and I forgot his name, but it was this analytics thing that was done where they threw every player and all their accomplishments and what they achieved into a supercomputer. And this supercomputer actually concluded that Tim Duncan was the second greatest player of all time, which anybody who has him in the top 5 can't argue with you. Now, anybody have him as a GOAT, I won't go that far. I think maybe he should, like when we talk about the GOATs, he should be in that conversation as far as what he achieved, him being the greatest power forward of all time. Yes, I've heard arguments that he plays center for a lot of his career, but early on he was listed as power forward, so that's why we give him that. So if it wasn't for some people that I actually have above him on the list, he could actually be high. He actually could be higher, but I just don't think he is greater than these 5 players. Tim Duncan, by the way, as far as defense also, in my opinion, 3rd greatest defender in league history. But let's get to number 5 on my list. Speaking of the number 5, I have this man, Mr. Russell, as he was called. Bill Russell, I have at number 5. Now, he only averaged 15 points a game, which some people would laugh at nowadays and say, he couldn't even play in this generation. For somebody who I consider the greatest defender of all time, he also averaged 22.5 rebounds a game, which is pretty phenomenal considering he actually played with this guy who is the walking stat book in Wilt Chamberlain. He still averaged that many rebounds. He was a 12-time All-Star, 11-time All-NBA member, 4-time rebound champ, which again is pretty incredible considering he played alongside Wilt Chamberlain. He was 11-time NBA champion, 5-time league MVP. Why Bill was playing, and here's why I have on this high on the list. The only way we should judge players when we have them on list is to judge them based on the era in which they played. Yes, I know he only played in an era with 8 teams, so that's why some people I've seen don't even have him on the list or he's not ranked that high. But for youngsters and people who are listening, when you make a list who is the greatest of all time, you have to judge them in the era in which they played. And because of that, that's why I have Bill Russell here on the list. Plus, being the greatest defender, I believe, ever. Was his team stacked with Hall of Fame players? Absolutely. But he was the leader and the unquestioned leader of those teams, outside of Red Auerbach, of course, who was a coach. And it was hard for him to be that back then, considering the racial climate of the country during that time. Mr. Russell, as he was called, God rest his soul, number 5 on my list. So let's go to number 4 on my list. The Magic Man, as he was called, also is what people call him today. People don't even call this man by his real name, Irvin. He is known as Magic Johnson. He averaged 19.5 points per game, about 7 rebounds a game, 11.2 assists for his career, which I believe is the highest career average for assists, which again is why he is considered the GOAT point guard. Sorry, Steph fans. Magic Johnson is the GOAT point guard still. But in any case, back to Magic. Of course, 52% field goal percentage from the field. Free throw percentage, he actually averaged about 85% from the free throw line, which for somebody who couldn't shoot, he made them from the line. 12-time All-Star, 5-time NBA champion, 3-time Finals MVP. He was a 10-time All-NBA member, 4-time assist champ, 2-time actually steals champ, which even though I know some people say that Magic wasn't good on defense, he had enough court awareness to be 2-time steals champ, so he wasn't locking folks up, but he still actually wasn't out there being a complete liability. Of course, he won the league MVP 3 times. He was a 2-time All-Star Game MVP, and he was on the 1979-80 All-Rookie team, which he didn't win All-Rookie. That was Larry Bird that year, but still pretty great. Magic was the engine to what was considered one of the greatest teams in history, which was the Showtime Lakers during the 80s. He literally made the finals, I believe it was 8 times in 10 years, which is pretty insane. He won 5 times. We give LeBron James credit for going to the finals 8 straight times, but in a decade, this man's team was basically in the finals every year outside of 2, which is pretty incredible. Magic, I'll put like this for people who say Magic played with great players like Kareem and James Worthy and Byron Scott and people like that. Well, Norm Nixon. Actually, that is true. He had great team members, but prior to Magic being drafted to the Lakers, and this is even with Kareem on the team, were not very good. And then Magic goes there, transforms them, and then take off, and then they pretty much run the West, which, yes, I've also heard the argument, which is actually kind of true, that the West for that era wasn't that good. It was basically the equivalent to the LeBron James East during that time, which is fine. But again, I have to give people credit for what they did and for what Magic accomplished during that time is phenomenal. It's why I have them number 4 on my list. Everybody who's basically in the 4 or above spot is considered the GOAT in their position, and in a lot of people's minds, unquestioned, which is why I have him number 4. Let's get to number 3 on my list. So this player, I don't know why he doesn't get brought up more in the GOAT conversation. Now, I get why. It's because, he's a center. He was, boring. I mean, he really didn't bring the ball up. He didn't have any fancy, ball handling skills. I mean, all he did was, you would dump the ball to him and then right shoulder, skyhook, swish, run back down court. But in my opinion, I think he is underrated in that respect. Do I have him as the GOAT? Of course not. That's why he's number 3. But I still think he deserves to be mentioned when we talk about the GOAT, and that is Kareem AbdulJabbar. He averaged 24.6. I ran it up, give him 25 points a game, 11 rebounds a game, about 3.5. We're going to round it up, 4 assists a game, 55.9 or 56% shooting from the field. Free throw, he actually wasn't bad for a man his size, a 72% free throw percentage. He was a 19-time All-Star, 2-time NBA scoring champ. He was a one-time rebound champ, a 4-time block champ, which is pretty impressive. With that, he was actually 11-time All-Defense, so he was a very good defender, 15-time All-NBA, of course, 6-time NBA champ, 2 of those being final MVP. He was a Rookie of the Year in, I believe, 69 and 70. He was a 6-time league MVP, and some of this was back when players were voting for league MVP. Well, it was why the trophy probably should be named after Kareem. You know what? That's another story for another day. So Kareem, considered by many the greatest center of all time. I know he gets a lot of slander now for young people because when you look at a player like Shaq, even Hakeem, in some people's eyes, Wilt, he wasn't, they would say, he would get bodied by those guys. But again, there's not a center who ever played the game, when you talk about that, who can touch what Kareem did. He was great since the minute he decided to pick up a basketball. He won in high school. He won in college. He won in the pros. Of the 6 titles that he has, one of those he actually won in Milwaukee, the team that he was drafted to, alongside, of course, Oscar Robertson, who, shout out to him, didn't make the list, but a great, phenomenal player. Kareem was that good of a player. Now that we're up to 1-2, get to those 2 players, this is when it's about to become very, very interesting, because these 2 players, who y'all already know who they are, gets debated highly about who's the GOAT. If you listened to my podcast in the past, y'all already know my opinion on this. So in case you haven't, I'm going to get into who I have 2 and 1 and make my case for both. So at number 2 on my list, I have LeBron Ramon James. King James, as he's known as, the chosen one, as was tattooed on his back. The kid from Akron is number 2 on my list. Still playing, by the way. But with that being said, he is a career 27.2 per game scorer, which I believe is 5th highest league average ever. Of course, as we know, he's the all-time scoring leader. 7.5 rebounds he averaged, 7 assists a game he averaged, about 50% field goal percentage from the field. Free throw, he was about 74%, I'll give it to him, free throw percentage for his career. Of course, 19-time All-Star, 19-time All-NBA. He was a Rookie of the Year back when he first started in 2003-04. He was a 1-time scoring champ. He was a 4-time league MVP, 4-time NBA champion, 4 of those being finals MVP, 6-time All-Defense, 5 of those being first team. And when he retires, they should just automatically put him into the Hall of Fame. So I know some people, because of his finals record being 4-6 in the finals, people automatically want to say that he probably even shouldn't be ranked as high. To those people, look, again, as I said, everybody's list is subjective, but for me, when you look at what LeBron James did for his entire career, what he did is undeniable. LeBron James, I believe, gets a lot of hate, and it's not because of him. It's because of his annoying, disgusting fan base, which is why with LeBron, he gets that much hate, because there's nothing that LeBron has done that actually says people should hate on him. He's been an ambassador for the sport. He promotes the game well. He, for what we know, loves his family, pushes his kids to be successful, backs them up 100%. So for me, LeBron James, number 2. I just couldn't put on 1 because, again, when you start to nitpick compared to the guy having number 1, who is Michael Jordan, people. But though Michael early on did not win, you can't point to a series that Michael Jordan lost and say they lost because of that dude. But there are a couple of series that you can point to in LeBron James's career and say they lost because of that man. And because of that alone is why he's number 2, and I got Mike at number 1. And to get to Michael Jordan, the GOAT, and the GOAT in a lot of people's opinion, he, for his career, averaged 30.1 points a game, which, by the way, is the highest league average in history, higher than even Wilt, the stat book Chamberlain. He averaged 6 rebounds a game for his career, 5 assists, 49 of 50% field goal percentage from the field, 83.5% from the free throw line. He was a 14-time All-Star, 10-time scoring champ, 3-time steals champ, 6-time NBA champion with 6 of those MVPs with those championships, 11-time All-NBA. He was a 9-time All-Defensive Team member. He was a 1984-85. He was on the All-Rookie team. He also was Rookie of the Year that year as well. 5-time league MVP, which is why they named the MVP trophy after him. Kareem does have a case, but they gave it to Jordan. He's the undeniable face of the NBA. When you look at history to this day, they should actually change the logo to him, but neither here nor there. So, in my opinion, he is clearly number 1, and LeBron is a solid number 2. And as I mentioned to you when I was talking about LeBron, it's simply because when Jordan played, yes, he lost early on in his career. I believe he was 1-9 in the playoffs before he actually started winning. People bring up that stat before he got Pippen, which, by the way, is a completely stupid argument. Because Scotty, when he got there, was coming off the bench, was not actually that good of a player, averaging less than 7 points a game. But y'all want to tell me that he didn't start winning until he got Pippen. No, Pippen was on those teams when he was actually losing too, by the way. So, yeah, if anybody want to give that line, which is off base. But anyway, even during those times, when you looked, everybody knew Jordan was the dude. Oh, my bad. I actually forgot an accolade that Jordan had. He was actually a Defensive Player of the Year as well back in 1987-88 because Jordan, unquestionably the undisputed, not only GOAT of the sport, best shooting guard ever, and best two-way player who has ever played the game, and I don't think that's actually debatable. During his playing career, when the Bulls did start winning from 1990 to 1998, did y'all know in that span that the Bulls, when Jordan was playing, did not lose more than 2 games in a row? Think about that for a second. For an 8-year period when Jordan was playing, the Bulls did not lose more than 2 games in a row as a team. And that team, when he won his first three-peat, which was in 91 to 93, and then his second three-peat after he came back from 96 to 98, they literally did not lose more than 2 games. That is dominance. No other player outside of, you got to go back to the Russell and them days, and even they don't even have a record that long where that happened. He has the record, or at least number 2, for most wins in a regular season as a team, the 72-10 Bulls, who I consider the greatest team of all time. They actually won the championship that year. And here's another case that people say, well, Jordan never played against a team, for example, like the Golden State Warriors. That's true. That's because the Bulls were the Warriors. He didn't have to slay the monster because he was the monster that nobody, when he started winning, could slay. And yes, did he lose that one time in 95 after coming back from playing baseball and literally only playing 16 games in the regular season? Sure. Yeah, he did. He lost. That's fine. That's a part of his resume. But he's also three-peated, which there's only been 3 teams in NBA history to do that, and he did it twice. Michael was just that good. Michael Jordan, still to this day, undisputed GOAT. Maybe one day somebody's going to come and actually unseat him.